All right, so to begin, everyone's least favorite thing, a prologue. Who the heck am I anyway? Why am I here? What am I doing? Welcome, folks, to Co-Writing and You, how to collaboratively write a book without murdering your co-authors. My first and maybe only writing workshop. My name is K.A. Mielke. I use he/him and they/them pronouns, and I am a victim of the beast known as the collaborative writing process. It has sunk its fangs from its 2 or more heads into my flesh, and I may never escape its clutches. If you too are kept prisoner in its cave and feasted upon, or you're looking to be for whatever reason, then you've come to the right place. While I hesitate to call myself an expert on any writing matter, my imposter syndrome simply wouldn't allow it, but that's another beast that we will not be talking about today. I do have more experience co-writing than is average. Most notably, last year I self-published Victory Lap. Right there, apologies to Mr. Gaiman on my Neil Gaiman shelf, with my friend Riley Alexis Wood. Victory Lap was a book 5 years in the making, starting off as a web series project Alexis was putting together for school before she approached me to help adapt it into a novel. Together we wrote and rewrote a 90,000 word book, submitted it to 50 agents, agreed to cut out an entire point of view, and submitted it to 50 more agents. After we ran out of places to submit to and set it aside to write the next thing, we found it hard to let go of. 2 years later, we still love this book. So we tried to run a Kickstarter at the very beginning of the pandemic and failed, and finally just released it in December of 2020. So even with my most successful collaboration, I have solid experience weathering extreme highs and lows with a co-writer. Does this make me an expert? Absolutely not. And the main reason for that is because no matter what people who give writing advice for a living suggest, writing is an individual and personal experience, and it's impossible to give any advice that works for everyone. Please note, any advice found within this Zoom meeting may be wrong for you and your process. I'm not a prescriptive advice kind of creative, but I hope some of the things I've learned can be helpful to you if you're looking to collaborate in the future. The full script for this talk will be available next week on my website at kamielke.com. Pause for coffee break. Part 1, my experience. What is it? Do I have any? Let's find out. Some budding young writers get into writing through fan fiction. Others jump right into original work. I got into writing through text-based role-playing on a website called Gaia Online. That's only partially true. I'd always made up stories. In kindergarten, I drew superhero comics about taking on my bullies and saving whoever I had a crush on that week. At 10 years old, I was bringing floppy disks to the home of my best friend and future Victory Lap co-author, Alexis, where we argued about how books were formatted and acted out our first co-written stories in the park down the street. But it wasn't until getting on the internet and finding a wider community of writers, some living mere hours from me, others across the ocean, that I really started writing like I needed it to live. My dreams of being a professional were still some years away, but with the instantaneous feedback loop of crafting a story with other people, I was hooked on a version of writing that stuffed my brain full of happy chemicals. A far cry from the stereotype of the brooding alcoholic misanthrope on track to true artist himself to death. In hindsight, I benefited from meeting abnormally kind and supportive people as a preteen online, including our lovely moderator, Marion. Kindness and support aren't exactly what the internet is known for. In truth, people were probably too kind when it took way too long to stop writing hot piles of problematic garbage because I was a 12-year-old boy. But that's best saved for my next lecture. So you're a brooding and edgy teenager, how to stop writing like one. Since my early role-playing days, I've written, rewritten, queried to death, and self-published Victory Lap. Again, apologies to Mr. Damon. I've tried to get a webcomic and video series off the ground, collaborating with artists and indie film directors. I've joined a lovely community of writers on hitrecord.org, writing stories together that went on to be produced as impressively professional audio stories. And I've started 3 separate novels with my partner in both prose and marriage, Miranda Moth, finishing and querying one of them so far, and working on the most recent this month for National Novel Writing Month. So luckily that's going well, otherwise I shouldn't be giving this talk. But before deciding on any of these projects, there was a point where I needed to decide, do I write this alone? Or would the story benefit from a co-writer? Maybe the story even needs a co-writer. Pause once more for my comforting coffee break. I would have made a slideshow, but I don't know how to make slideshows. Part 2, picking your co-author, where to find other writers in the wild, and how to know you need one. Victory Lap is what is sometimes condescendingly called an issue book, in that one of its main characters is a transgender girl, and the novel deals with some of the more challenging aspects of coming out as trans in a small country town. I am not a trans woman, and while I don't exactly consider myself 100% cisgender at the time of Zoom lecture, I did when we first started writing, and so I took ownership of the hapless, cisgender, arguably less integrally queer main character, Josh. When planning to write Victory Lap with Alexis, I turned to other examples of co-written YA with similar dynamics for guidance. Will Grayson by John Green and David Levithan is told by the dual POVs of a very early John Green's straight protagonist and David Levithan's gay protagonist. All American Boys by Jason Reynolds and Brendan Keeley is a dual POV YA that explored racism and privilege from the perspectives of a white boy and a black boy in the same community. As I'm certain these books would be lacking without the authenticity of David Levithan or Jason Reynolds' lived experiences and authorial voices, I'm equally certain I could not have written Victory Lap on my own. I'm not certain Alexis needed a co-author to write this book, but I definitely did. But maybe your idea for your novel is not an issue book, or doesn't dive too deep into unknown territories for you as a writer. It's enough to admire another writer's work, to feel like your voices and styles complement each other, whether as distinct points of view, as was the case in Victory Lap, or as a cohesive narrative voice, as I found writing with Miranda. Where Victory Lap has sometimes been criticized as having voices that are too distinct, in Miranda I found a collaborator who, despite having a clear voice of their own, meshes so well with mine as to be seamless in the finished product. There are a number of ideas I've gotten independently that I can honestly say would be better with their collaboration. Purely anecdotally, while contemporary YA seems to have the most examples of distinct POV voices, I've noticed this path chosen most often by adult speculative fiction. Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett's Good Omens, The Tales of Pell by Delilah S. Dawson and Kevin Hearn, and The Expanse by the co-authors known together as James S.A. Corey, to name a few examples. The most common advice I hear when people are giving advice about co-writing with someone is to be careful when picking a friend or a loved one. This is very much like the advice you get when you're warned not to move in with friends, lest they find out that you don't scrape your food into the trash before putting dishes in the sink, or you leave beard hairs absolutely everywhere. And that's fine advice, but I would be a hypocrite to give it. Now, I am extremely fortunate. 7-year-old me could very easily have been best friends with a normal kid who never thought, what if a hobbit had to fight vampires? I'd better write that down. I could have married someone much more interested in taxidermy or train sets than writing books. But as enjoyable as my best co-writing experiences have been, co-writing with friends hasn't always been easy, and I've had some devastating collaborations. I've been ghosted by collaborators I thought were friends, and been belittled by older writers with more experience than me. In fact, my worst collaborating experience came from someone I didn't even know, who only joined a project because a friend recommended them and brought them in and vouched for their professionalism. Knowing how your collaborator works, how they operate under stress, how they treat the people around them are all fundamental in knowing how they will work as your co-author. You're much less likely to be blindsided by a domineering personality or agreements no one is happy with. Excuse me. Now, if you've never been approached about co-writing, you might be wondering where to even find a co-writer. Unfortunately for everyone sharing my particular brand of social anxiety, the answer lies in that most paradoxical necessity of the solitary writer: community. There are thriving communities of writers all over the internet, from role-play forums to Discord servers, from writer-specific websites like Absolute Right and Inked Voices, to more general book Twitter. Or if you're particularly daring in the pandemic, you could go searching for writing community in the real world out there. The illustrator and text designer of Victory Lap, Ursula Gray, is a good friend I first met at a NaNoWriMo event in 2014, as are most of my trusted beta readers and the rest of our in-person writing group. I am the writer I am today because I was brave enough to make connections and bold enough to share my work, and I urge anyone with reservations about joining the writing community at large to get out there, be friendly, and make connections. And finally, while I have never followed this advice myself, it would be irresponsible for me not to tell you that you might want to get a written agreement between yourself and your co-writer detailing things like expected division of workload, division of credit, eventual profits, expectations for deadlines, how much time you'd like for deadlines between drafts, how even you expecting, sorry, how you're expecting to be if you're looking for marketing or reviews or purchasing print copies to sell at a convention. These are all things that can feel unbalanced if you don't work it out ahead of time. People's lives get busy. There's a lot to think about when considering bringing in another person in your creative process. What happens to the story if one party decides they don't want to write it anymore? It can be helpful when tensions are high to have something clearly written out for your reference when needed. Experts have reason to believe a written and signed agreement will cut down on your chances of murdering or being murdered by at least 50%. It's me, I'm experts. I encourage you to also sip coffee during this lecture so we can all stay awake. Part 3, strengths and weaknesses. Know yours and your co-writers to defeat them in armed combat in case the inevitable can't be avoided. This is it, the most important writing advice I have to give. Before writing with another person, you must absolutely take a comprehensive personality test to evaluate red flags. Don't trust anyone who prefers Pepsi over Coke. Sorry to my grandmother. Kick INFPs to the curb and never write with a Scorpio, especially if you are one. Follow these simple commandments and you will never have to murder your co-writer. Or I guess you could just ask each other questions like a normal person, but that's much more work. We all have our writing methods. Some of us plot so extensively writing is barely more than adding extra detail to a 50,000 word outline. Some of us have all these high concept ideas, but struggle to get them on the page, to turn cool concepts into satisfying plots and stories. Some of us just really love quippy dialogue and everything else is in service of getting characters to talk to each other and be sassy like we all think it's a Joss Whedon production. That one's me. Some of us are brain dead without coffee, and that one is also me. You might have an idea of your strengths and weaknesses already, but nothing truly illustrates them quite like working with someone else. In my most enjoyable and successful partnerships, I've consistently been partnered with someone who has a really cool concept, a handful of major plot points, some loose ideas and characters, and a skill with editing and refining. My greatest strength then has been in the consistency in writing a little bit every day, fleshing out the middle of the story, nagging my co-authors when they're slacking, following up on submissions and chasing down reviewers. I'm more of a worker bee than a queen, and that's fine. We've all got jobs to do. If you're working in a group of writers larger than 2, these job descriptions are still vital, but I found it's especially important that one writer take the lead as the editor, the showrunner, or the stylistic director. When working on various audio projects on Hit Record, I was sometimes in writers' rooms of up to 10 writers, each brilliant and talented in their own way, but with distinct styles. While each of us read over, provided notes for, and edited one another's scenes and work, ultimately it was up to the writer who started these projects, Mike Pilola, to unify our styles into one narrative voice. As a personable leader with a clear creative vision and a skilled writer in his own right, Mike was the ideal team leader, and you can find links to some of our productions on my website. Regardless of whether you consider yourself a plotter, a pantser, or any portmanteau in between, I do strongly advise the use of an outline if you're writing with someone else. There is still plenty of room for natural, spontaneous writing with even a fairly rigid outline, mostly in between the big plot points or how you characterize characters. It's important to have a collaborative roadmap to ensure compatibility and have plenty of time to figure out how your separate visions for a story mesh together. And crucially, in case things go wrong, this also gives you plenty of time to pull the plug if it isn't working out before you're in too deep. I know the joke here is that everything I'm saying is crucial to avoid murder, but I sincerely think this is the most important one. When co-writing, no one wants to feel like their core concept is going in the wrong direction or like they're ruining someone else's idea. A clear roadmap can prevent a lot of heartbreak before it starts. Part 3.2, picking the method of collaboration. Famously, to me at least, as a fanboy, Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett wrote Good Omens by tackling a scene or a chapter, then calling each other to read what they had. If Google Docs were around at the time, they might have used it. but also probably not because Gaiman is a fountain pen and notebook kind of guy. I choose to use Google Docs for convenience when writing with someone else, as I enjoy writing on my phone and seeing updates to the story in real time, but I do find it works better in a computer browser than in the app on iPads or phones. Make sure you agree on a method convenient for each of you, whether it's emailing chapters back and forth or including new scenes in loquacious love letters lovingly delivered by post. Part 4, writing with others, a practical application. I really thought I would be talking for much longer than this, but we are going to do a co-writing exercise now. I would love to give all very anxious people a chance to jump ship, be free before the scary part starts, where I will be asking all of you to talk to strangers. I am the last person in the world who will judge you for exiting this Zoom call now. I empathize 100%. So, using breakout rooms, which Marion has told me can be done, I would like everyone to partner up into small groups and craft stories the way the pioneers did by role-playing back and forth with your chat box. Flip a coin to see who goes first, have fun with it, add dialogue, add description, just go with the flow. Marion will set up a 15-minute timer, and then we'll check in when it's finished. Okay, well, welcome back. I gave you a chance to jump ship before. I'll give you this chance again. Is there anyone who would like to share what they wrote? Or you can keep it private if you prefer. It's totally fine.
Well, I know my partner's still typing what we were talking about. So
I have to be honest, Jim Otar and I, we decided not to write. We just got to know each other.
That's also a very valuable part.
It is. I mean, that's the first process, is figuring out who you are and what you write about and going from there. So we didn't write anything. What we did was we just explored the type of writing that we do.
I call that a success. Great job.
Mary and I wrote. I don't know if you, what do you think, Mary? Is it cool if we share ours?
Yeah, go for it. You can do that.
All right, awesome. I was trying to print screen, so I'll just have to open my my document here, and I'm happy to share. Is that cool, Christopher?
Yeah, it's great.
All right. So we kind of first we talked about the scene setting and who the characters were, and then we started writing back and forth. So I was writing from one perspective, from Scott's perspective, and Mary was doing from Tammy's perspective. So Scott checked his watch and drummed his fingers on the table. She was late again. He picked up his teaspoon and checked his teeth for spinach in the reflection. Tammy knew she was late. She never minded keeping things interesting like that. She scanned the room looking for Scott's head. Where was he? He looked pensive, but maybe she was just projecting her own feelings onto him. What was that in his teeth? Sorry, I'm late. Nothing. I mean, something, but it's nothing. The food and the lateness, both no big deal. He smiled nervously. And dabbed his paper serviette against his brow. Have you ordered drinks yet? Nope, was just waiting for you, honey. He stood and pecked her dry cheek. Tammy hadn't decided if alcohol was called for yet. Maybe just 1 or 10. That's as far as we got.
Love it. Great job. I did find the food in his teeth pretty funny. Would anyone else like to share or provide encouraging comments? That was a lot of writing for 15 minutes.
yeah.
Roseanne and I had something. If that's okay, Marion?
Can we unshare that screen first?
Yes.
Who's sharing their screen?
Carol Jerry Taylor, I think.
Okay, let me see.
Thanks, Michelle, for reading what we wrote. We didn't write as much as everyone, as what you just read, everybody, or listened to. but go for it, Michelle.
Yeah, we were working out exactly what the conflict would be, points of view, which of us was going to try what. So, hang on now. I can't believe I'm on another blind date. He's talking, but I'm only half listening. Like, oh my God, I haven't seen you in ages. Do you remember that time we hid the weed in Mr. Matthews' desk and it stank out the room and the cops came? I mean, we should legalize. Well, I always said we should legalize weed. God knows a math teacher could use it. You know, we used to get some good weed together though, eh? Excuse me? Do I know you? What do you mean? We've always hung out together since grade 8. I'm Susie. Maybe you think I'm my sister Mandy. Of course you're Mandy. I'd know you anywhere. All those times in the shed when we were naked in the dark. I awkwardly glance at my date, who was enamored by this talking head. And that's as far as we got.
Excellent stuff. Thank you for sharing.
Wow.
It's a nightmare personally to be in that situation, but good conflict.
I can talk about what Lori and I pulled together quickly. Want? Lori, yeah. You want to unmute as well? So Lori and I got to know each other a little bit more, and I indicated that I'm pretty much doing flash fiction or microfiction right now with prompts. And so we decided to pick about 5 words and start our story that way. So we took turns choosing words. So we went with rain, gift, happiness, doubt, and pretty eyes. So we came up with a story about a little girl coming home from school with a painting for her mom, except it's been raining, her backpack is open, she ruins the picture. So I'll just read it really quickly. The rain started just as Annie began her walk home from school that day. She began splashing in the puddles with her red rubber boots. She was extra happy as she thought about the painting in her backpack, which was a gift for her mom's birthday. The painting included her mom and dad, and the sun was shining and the flowers were blooming. Once home, her mom greeted her at the door. To Annie's dismay, her backpack was open all the time and the painting was ruined. She began to cry. "Don't cry your pretty eyes," said her mom. "But it had dad with us and we were together again and happy." "Sweetie, even though dad is not with us anymore, have no doubt that he loves you and he is watching over us." Her mom dabbed her tears and gave her a reassuring hug, and that's all we got.
Kimberly, you did an awesome job of putting our words together.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It was a really good collaborative effort. Thank you.
It's fun.
Great, love it. Also love flash fiction in general. It's a lovely medium to get right to the heart of a story. Anyone else like to share? Or would we like to move on? I think we're good. Okay. So the last part here is just part 5. Let's A, some cues in the event that you have any questions before we disband today. If you can't think of any questions now, but do think of the perfect question while you're struggling to fall asleep tonight, my DMs are always open on Twitter at @KAMielke. I will happily do free labor for the small fee of a positive review on Goodreads. I will also still happily provide free labor for nothing, but I just have to plug my book, and I love reviews. That's all my planned talky bits. If anyone has any questions, I can struggle to answer them. Or we can.
Lindsay? Looks like Lindsay has a question.
Hey, Lindsay always has a question. It's something you can depend on. Yeah, I had just never ever considered this sort of writing before. I'm curious if you ever tried other forms of writing, or if you've always been a collaborative writer, and if you haven't written individually before, if you plan to do it in the future, or if you always want to just do collaborative.
I was indoctrinated at a young age into the collaborative lifestyle, but I do probably most of my writing solo. I've written and published a couple of short stories in various magazines over the years, and I have written like 5 solo books and tried to get them in front of agents. I have a book out right now, like in the hands of agents. So I mean, whether or not I will have anything solo out professionally published is a different question, but I am planning to release a short story collection sometime early next year once I finalize the edits of it and get my cover art in, which I've already commissioned. So that'll be soon. If anyone wants to follow me on Twitter, that's definitely where you can hear about it. Thank you for being the person with the question. Every group needs one.
Thank you. It's my honor and privilege.
Okay, looks like there's another question in the chat.
Does look that
Lori
way.
says, I have several books of murder mystery started, but can't seem to get them finished. I have wondered if adding a co-writer to get them finished is the way to go. Any comments on that?
I mean, it definitely can be. It's there are lots of possible solutions to not being able to finish something or being able to achieve a level of quality that you're happy with. You could take a small break to look at craft articles, but you could also bring in a friend. It might be more fun. Maybe what's missing is just that it's a little bit lonely, a little bit not so fun. Or if you don't want to have a co-writer, you can get friends to read samples or chapters or individual stories and provide feedback. And that can provide a similar sort of collaborative feeling that a co-writer can, without having to fully lose the control that writing solo gives you. Hope that somewhat answers the question. It is still a very individual thing. You have to decide it for yourself. You might want to give it a try with a less, something with lower stakes, like one story if you've never tried co-writing with somebody before. Just like a 2,000 word short story with somebody you trust, or somebody who's writing you really like, who you can easily chat with and start communicating about that.
Okay, another question. I was asked to do a graphic
Thank
book
you.
by a friend who has the story. I think we need a good outline first and pick a strong point to start with for the cover. Does that sound reasonable? New to this, but as an artist and a family with a collection of comics, I thought it would be interesting to try. So I guess the question is, if it's good to have an outline, pick a strong point and go from there.
I think it's usually good to have an outline, especially if you're signing on to be the artist of a graphic novel. To have, like, if you're going for co-creator status and have like some input on the story before you start writing, that could make it more enjoyable for you, especially if you're not starting off the collaboration with here is my rate, I get paid this much if you want to hire me, and you're doing it more as like a we're friends and we're going to work together. I think a sharing of input in the story would really help out, and so I would recommend writing an outline together, even if like one person is the writer and one person is the artist. I think co-creating is a more equitable solution if no one's getting paid right away.
Okay, any other questions? Oh, so Carol says, I thought I would do that by asking her questions in response to your comment.
Sorry, is that the...
That was the person who asked the question, sorry. Yeah, it's more just an in response. So that seems like a good way. Questions is always good, in my opinion.
Yeah, communication is usually the answer. So what do I do in this situation? Sadly, it is the very difficult to achieve communication with another human being.
Why we write.
Can't really be good
And Michelle Butler-Hallett, who is going to be presenting later on soon, right after this, has shared a link with a template for structuring crime fiction for people who like to have a structure. Oh, and there's different kinds of stories, templates for different sorts of stories at plotter.com, plottr.com. That's in the chat if anyone is unable to see the chat. That's the link, plottr.com. Okay, did you have any final thoughts, comments, wisdom?
Just thank you for attending and for giving this co-writing thing a shot. It can be pretty scary. It can be daunting. It can be really difficult sometimes, but it's really fun when it works. So I'm grateful you all attended and listened to me babble on for 15 short minutes.
All right,
I hope
thanks
you
a lot.
enjoy the rest of the conference.